Good day. Welcome to the Cory Morgan Show. Boy, what a night we had last night. I'm a little groggy today. I got up early. We didn't get out of here until a little after midnight. Oh, I guess one upside is the downtown traffic isn't too bad at all at midnight. I got to admit, in getting older, I get a little more creeped out walking to the car in the dark out there downtown. But everything went well. We actually had a conclusion we could settle on by the time we left. I really wasn't willing to make a good guess as to how things were going to turn out. The only thing I felt confident about in the American election last night was that we wouldn't have any results we could talk about. We'd end up leaving here and saying, well, we'll update you as it comes along. But no, we found out who the president was going to be by the end of the night. And, now we have all day in the next few weeks and months and years to see what that means and discuss it. Before I get more on, with the American election, we still do have things happening around here. I got a guest who will be coming in. We'll cover more of the American stuff with a strategist and pundit, Alise Mills, and we'll break down kind of what happened in the election and what it's going to mean to us in Canada. Of course, we always got to apply our lens to it. I mean, the American election affects us, but it's still their election, not ours. Though if you listen to CTV and CBC and such, you wouldn't know it. All right, so yes, use that comment scroll, guys. Good to see you all. Paradoxy, hey, good meeting you last weekend. I'm going to talk a little about the AGM in a moment here. Mr. Stanley, Canada RV, lots of folks jumping in there. Use that comment scroll if you're on live, guys. I appreciate it, and we can have a conversation. I don't necessarily read them all out, but I do see them all, and it does help the show along. Reminds me that there are people on the other side of the camera. So yeah, last weekend as well, it's kind of overshadowed by the American election, but the largest political convention in Canadian history was held. So I was at the 2024 UCP AGM. I saw Alberta Conservatives at both their best and at their worst. Going back, in 2009, I was VP policy of a party, the Wild Rose Party, and I organized the AGM that year at a recreation center in Northwest Calgary. So with about 300 people in attendance, we deliberated policy and elected a board with the sound of basketballs pounding behind a thin wall divider separating us from a gymnasium. And we felt the election and the event went excellently. We were certain we were on the path to dislodge the Progressive Conservatives from their 38-year reign in Alberta. We were particularly buoyed by a young lady named Danielle Smith, who announced that day she was going to pursue the leadership of our little party. The events held in that hall did indeed lead to the end of the PC dynasty, and Danielle Smith did eventually become Alberta's premier, though the path was wilder and more convoluted than any of us could ever have imagined at that time. We also never imagined we'd see an AGM with over 6,000 members participating, as happened with the UCP in Red Deer last weekend. It was amazing to observe, actually, the organizational talent applied to hosting thousands of delegates, and it went so smoothly. Just feeding the few hundred people at the 2009 event took weeks of preparation and was a workout for our volunteers. In Red Deer, everything from the registrations to the meals went incredibly smoothly at the UCP gathering. And more impressive than that logistical feat, though, was that massive turnout. I've attended dozens of conventions, special meetings, leadership events over the years. There's a core of party stalwarts who perennially attend these events, and they're important, and you become accustomed to seeing their faces at these. They're the folks who hold things together during the tougher times in politics. But what was most striking to me last weekend was the number of new faces. Thousands of people who have never attended a political event in their lives chose to spend hundreds of dollars of their hard-earned money and dedicate a weekend to taking part in the AGM. And despite the wishful thinking of opponents of the party and the massive turnout of new people to the convention, it wasn't inspired by negativity or an intent to oppose the leader. Those folks came out to be supportive of the leader and take part in molding the party. By the way, lots of people came to greet us at the Western Standard broadcast booth on the convention floor. It was great to see them. One who stood out to me was a gentleman who was perhaps in his early 60s. He came to chat with me for a bit. He was visibly excited, almost giddy, as he explained how he never realized before how he could take part in things like this, and he was ecstatic about being able to contribute. This guy's now going to be surely a political junkie for life, and I suspect I'll see him attending future events. In the hospitality events, suites at these events, they're nothing new, but they usually used to be comprised of a pair of adjoining hotel rooms with bathtubs packed with ice and beer. The suites on Friday night were incredible. Delegates traveled from room to room and enjoyed free eats and drinks from numerous organizations, including, of course, the Western Standard. It was quite a room. Delegates, they mingled, networked, and bonded. And in these suites' first-time convention attendees discovered that actually politics can be fun at times, too. So a lot of them are going to be back, and it's a great development. Now, unfortunately, last weekend, delegates got to see the uglier side of partisan politics, too. Factions, predominantly driven by chronically malcontent fringe operators, worked their hardest to sow dissent among the membership. They distributed fake brochures implying Daniel Smith was taking part in some Islamic-inspired conspiracy, and they managed to get the phone numbers of delegates and harass them in the night with phone calls claiming to be part of, Smith's Islamic conspiracy. Brochures were put on windshields every hotel in town, claiming Smith was actually being supported by the NDP. And ridiculous report cards were handed out giving Smith a failing grade as a leader. All the attempts to undermine Smith still failed dismally, as she garnered 91.5% support from the memberships in that leadership review. Members saw through the sleazy tactics and chose to support the leader. Legacy media pundits hoping for internal party division, well, they left disappointed. And Alberta's NDP are disappointed as well. Smith has a very solid mandate from her members. You see, opponents are dismissing the turnout of the AGM as being a tiny minority of Albertans. Well, has any other party managed such a feat? A precedent's been set, and the UCP offered a demonstration of strength unlike any other party has. They not only have a massive membership base, but they have an active one. The members are willing to participate rather than just talk. So think about it. These are the donors, the door knockers, and the voters who are going to ensure the UCP wins the next election. We don't want to presume yet, but it's a pretty darn good start, and it's pretty foolhardy to dismiss them. So, while some of the first-time delegates had a bad taste left in their mouths from the campaign of weasels trying to unseat the leader, most still left the convention feeling optimistic and will remain involved. The UCP isn't just in power right now, it's growing. And no matter what party stripe one has, they should be impressed and encouraged when grassroots members get up and take part in the process. So rather than ignoring the momentum of the UCP and its members, other parties should be studying and learning to emulate them. Last weekend's event was a victory for democracy in Alberta. And I know I'm really banging the UCP drum. It's fine. I'm not a member. I certainly see them as the best party for Alberta as it sits. That could change in the course of a few years. But what I'm excited about was seeing thousands of people getting together, taking part. That's how it's done. That's how things get better, no matter what stripe you're at. So last weekend, hey, it was a success, and hats off to the UCP organizers and the leader, and of course the people who got up and went and took part of it. Look forward to seeing him in Edmonton next year as we observe that one, and well, we'll see what is coming up in the party front from then. All right, well, let's get on to the news. There's some other stuff happened besides the UCP convention. We got our news editor, Dave Naylor, in. You had a nice late night too, Dave.
I did, but most importantly, Peanut and his raccoon friend have been avenged.
They certainly have. It's the wrath of Peanut.
Right? Who would have thought in this day and age that the killing of a squirrel we don't know, but it may have had some sort of.
I think it had a little bit of impact.
You and I actually predicted it last week, so we were ahead of the trend. Or Linda Slobodian predicted it a few months ago, and she's got a column up there today. Big winners, obviously, Elon Musk. He made $15 billion overnight. With the shares in Tesla going up, he's going to get a big job in the administration and cut trillions out of the budget. RFK is actually going to get a real job and make America healthy again. Big losers, Hollywood. People obviously don't care what celebrities have to tell them. They don't care about J-Lo and Oprah and stuff like that. So the Canadian real estate market is going to be red hot with all the celebrities moving up here who have vowed to leave America.
Yeah, I will see if that actually happens. It's interesting to watch these, though. Yes, J-Lo is known for her oversized butt, not her oversized brain, and maybe she should stick to jiggling the part that makes her money rather than trying to pretend to have one that
exactly. And as people said, J-Lo should have been warning people about Diddy instead of Trump.
Yeah, but, she didn't do any favors there.
No, and obviously the fallout is the main stuff on the website. We've got reaction from all over the world, including Canada. Justin Singh says Canadians are afraid.
Justin Singh.
Justin Singh.
No, that works.
It was a late night, but I guess it does work. Yeah. Jagmeet Singh says Canadians are afraid. I don't think that's the case. Trump was congratulated by Trudeau and also Poilievre and Daniel Smith. And of course, the big questions for Alberta is the Keystone Pipeline. Trump has vowed to drill, baby, drill. And it'll be interesting. And we're going to try and get a hold of the Premier today to see if there's any interest in bringing it back. Now, we called Trump the winner about the same time as Fox, about 11 o'clock. But CNN wouldn't. NBC called it for Trump. CNN wouldn't. So I was able to watch it till 3 a.m. and CNN still hadn't called it for Trump, even though it was so obvious. And neither had CBC. CBC were too busy having their panelists complain that Trump was Hitler.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of complaining and whining at the mainstream media, and they were one of the big losers last night.
They were a huge loser last night, absolutely.
So yeah, it was fun and games, and Harris has already called Trump a few minutes ago to concede, and she's going to be speaking to her supporters at 2:00 Mountain Standard Time, and the Western Standard will be streaming it live.
Okay, well, we can see Harris. I mean, hopefully she maintains a bit of dignity. I really, again, thought that was, and I know Trump was no better 4 years ago. You know, when you've had a crowd of volunteers, supporters, donors, all gathered in a room, you could still address them, thank them. You know, you don't even have to concede at that time. You could say, you know, we're still waiting on things, but tonight, guys, thank you for coming out. I love you, blah, blah, blah. The usual stuff. We can write those speeches. And she didn't have the class to even appear. I saw the imagery of them walking out of that center, you know, dejected. It's just, it's sad that the tone has gotten that way.
Yeah, if you remember, Hillary did the same thing when Trump beat her. Interestingly, in the phone call today, Harris says it's very important to have a peaceful and organized transition. So it looks by the initial phone call today that she's taking it to game with class, and she should.
Well, that's good. Better late than never.
And let's face it, it wasn't close.
No,
she got her butt kicked.
There's no court challenges are going to change this or anything like that.
Not at all.
All right. Well, thanks for the update. I'll let you back into.
Well, I think I'll go have a nap on Derek's leather futon.
Yeah, he'll be in doing the pipeline. It's a good time to sneak into his office.
Yeah, I got 45 minutes.
Right on. All right, thanks, Dave.
You bet, Cory.
All right, that is our news editor, Dave Naylor. And yes, of course, American election news dominating. Lots of other stuff coming up on the site. And yes, the wise Linda Slobodian beat us all out of the gates. But I mean, Linda's brilliant. She knows her stuff. Check that stuff out, guys. It's on the westernstandard.news and take out a subscription. That's why we stay independent. We aren't among the legacy media losers, actually, last night. We're the ones who gave you things straight as we saw them. And the reason we can do it is because you subscribe. $9.99 a month, $100 a year, guys. Well worth it. It keeps us rolling, keeps our reporters out there, keeps us doing those broadcasts so they could buy pizza and the rest for us to hang around here till midnight last night and bring those election results to you as they came down. And you know, one thing I'm really happy about, I really am. I mean, as a conservative, I'm certainly happy. And again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I'm not a big fan of Trump himself. I do not think he's a good person. But if I was an American, I would still hold my nose and would have voted for him. And, you know, there's going to be better policies coming from him than would have come from Kamala Harris had she won things down there. Better for the United States and probably better for Canada, though there's some protectionist elements. Perhaps we'll discuss with Alise Mills shortly on that sort of thing. But the main thing I'm happy about is that it wasn't close. That's what really leads to the insanity. That's what leads to the division. It really does. It really heats things up. That was a real problem in 2020. That was a problem back with Gore and Bush as well. When you don't have a definitive winner on one side or another, then you get into that limbo. You get into the court challenges. You get into people wondering whether there was funny businesses in polling stations. You get into mistrust. And of course, at its worst, you can get into what happened on January 6th the other year. And we're not going to see that this time around. That is good. They can focus. I mean, you can still focus your political battles. You can still snipe at each other, and they surely will. But it won't be as loopy and as insane as it was before. Even if, and I mean, it didn't happen, and I'm happy for that. Had Harris won, I would have hoped then that it would have been a definitive win so that we don't go into, again, all of those battles and fights and wondering whether it was rigged. Though some people will always think so. That's the way it goes. But as it is, she has conceded, and we're going to see President Trump coming in next January. All right, so let's break it down a little more with somebody who spent a great deal of time actually working south of the border, a political watcher, pundit, strategist. She knows all this stuff inside out. Alise Mills is joining me today. Hi, Alise. How's it going?
That's great. I'm extremely happy. It's an exciting day. Back to business we go, Cory.
Yes, absolutely. And there's a lot of business to cover. You know, I mean, maybe I'll kind of start. We're still into a strange kind of limbo in a way, though. You know, the formal transition of power won't happen until January. Theoretically, Joe Biden is going to govern for the next month and a half, but he's kind of a non-factor anymore. It's not like you have a very active sitting and outgoing president at this time.
Well, the Democratic leadership is completely broken. There is no leader of the Democratic Party anymore, by de facto. The idea that Ms. Harris wouldn't even show up to thank her supporters and literally left them in the dark and the cold last night, as your previous guest was talking about, a la, Hillary Clinton, that tells me, and she's only just conceded to Trump like 15, 20 minutes ago as well. And actually there's lots of breaking news. Michigan is solidly and decidedly Trump. And that leaves a few other states to go that will probably also go red. The special prosecutor is looking at unwinding a lot of what's happened with Trump's legal cases too. They have no intention of putting this man in jail or continuing this anymore. So the skies are opening for Trump. But I do agree with you. I have myself some issues with Donald Trump, but what I'm excited about, and I know this to be very true because I worked in the States during the Trump years, and I've worked in the States subsequent to that during the Biden years, that people were so much worse off, Cory. It was pretty grim in the rural states for Americans. And I was in North Carolina. I was, of course, in DC. North Carolina, very proud of them last night, making the right decision, especially women of all colors and religions got out there and supported Trump. But it's so sad to see what's happened to really hardworking Americans. And you come back and you see how much even worse it is for Canadians here. And it just sort of gives you this general malaise. I'm excited to see Americans get going again. And I think, tech giants, investors, I think they're all going to be ready to go down there. And that's exciting for us as well.
Yeah, some optimism, some people can really use it. I mean, I think that's a lot of what backfired south of the border, and it's kind of what's backfiring up here right now. If people have traveled the Rust Belt and seen how it is out there, even pre-Trump, they're having a hard time. They've been having a hard time for a long time. With the coal mines are shutting down, manufacturing is hurting, and the Democrats were busy running off on woke tirades or calling people racists and onto that. Well, the people living in Michigan and Wisconsin and Ohio, everybody don't care. They want jobs and they want safety, and the Democrats weren't offering that.
Well, Michigan folding to Trump is a whopper for the Democratic establishment. And the thing is, the Democrats have become the party for the elite, and the Republicans are the party for the regular average person. And that we haven't seen the flip of the script like that since Ronald Reagan, 1980. And actually, I just see so many parallels. I mean, I was just a little tyke at the time, but being an avid political watcher, Reagan came out in that election and said, "Are you better off?" And that was all that had to be said. There was Morning in America, that incredible ad that went out there. Trump really followed that footprint this time. And Kamala Harris just ran from the question. She was all smiles and giggles. And what gets me, if this guy's Hitler, which I find completely offensive, and all the Jewish community must find that offensive, and he's so evil and he's such a threat to democracy, is your response smiles and giggles and going on Saturday Night Live, but you refuse to be able to answer on The View, which is your home turf, what you would have done differently and what your plans are for Americans? All she said was, women be scared. That's pretty much what she said. And smiles and giggles shouldn't be the response if he's this incredibly, intense threat to democracy. I found it outrageous. And women showed up last night and said, you know what? I don't vote on gender. I vote on what my family needs, what I need. And there's more single female parents in that country today than there were in 2020. And I can tell you, they're having a tough time. You travel anywhere like Kentucky, Cory, you see poverty like I haven't seen in my entire life.
And the Fourth Reich isn't building despite the fear mongering, and it's not going to happen. There's no troops massing on the Polish border at this time. But the Republicans do have power like they haven't had in a long, long time.
Yeah.
I mean, we're seeing now they've got the presidency, they've got the House, they've got the Senate, and they've got the Supreme Court. I imagine, despite what the fearmongers are saying, we're still going to see some big changes. If there's an opportunity to really shift things, whether it's dealing with the civil service, foreign affairs, the next 2 years of the time that President Trump is kind of going to have free reign to do what he pleases. So mean, I certainly hope it's a positive change.
He's got 4 years to hustle. He's got to get right out of the gate. This trifecta might not happen again for God knows how long. So he's going to be able to do things like appoint the head of ICE, so Homeland Security. These types of appointments are going to be important and precious to the Trump administration. And from what I know from inside the around Washington today, he's not making the same mistake he did on those he had hired for his team beforehand. So he's taking a much more direct approach. He's also reaching into the private sector as well. I know he's reaching in for those who understand Canada. So I also want to say something. I want to dispel this myth that the legacy media is spreading on Twitter that tariffs are inevitable with Trump. That is simply not true. What is inevitable is bad trade deals when your country hasn't put out a proper economic plan, hasn't put out policies, or is inconsistent in its approach. Trump is a deal maker. He's a negotiator. I've met with him before. He can easily be talked around and come to an agreement. It's not inevitable that there's going to be a 20% tariff for Canadians. But if you sit on your duff and you don't act like a serious figure, then we're going to be in a whole lot of trouble. So I want to just dispel that, because it drives me nuts to see that we're just going to lay down, oh, it's inevitable. Poor leadership leads to trade conflicts, tariffs. But here's the thing, Cory, I also want to say, because we won't step up and do what's right by NATO, we are actually getting a thrashing and a shellacking on other trade deals from other countries. Canadians aren't even aware of that, and neither is the legacy media.
No, and we can hope for some nuanced trade. Unfortunately, we look at Team Canada right now, and I don't hold a lot of optimism of strength on our side. But I look at things such as energy, and I would hope pragmatists within, at least advisors with President Trump, he's talked about tariffs on energy imports. But the reality is, if he wants to provide inexpensive energy to Americans, he has to look north of the border and facilitate our providing supply. That he knows enough that that's supply and demand. If you're going to provide it inexpensively, you've got to bring in that local supply. People talk about Keystone, but it's not like just flipping a switch and saying, well, we can finish that little portion and get it across the border. TransCanada Energy burned badly. Their investors burned badly. Just because you have 4 years of a supportive president doesn't mean they want to open their wallets and take a gamble again. The next Democrat could end up shutting it down like Biden did. So, I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done if we're going to finish that pipeline, for example.
Well, and also, I mean, the big question is, you're right. And I'm glad you brought this up, Cory, because this is also another infuriating topic for me. Everybody thinks it's just going to magically go. And I was tapped by the first Trump administration before his inauguration to give them a summary breakdown on the Canadian relations as it related to energy, specifically Keystone, because he wanted to do that the first day after the inauguration. And he did do that. But we've just... our environment minister and our prime minister has just inherently shut down extraction in this country. I mean, just in Atlantic Canada alone, that's $7 billion in GDP. That's over 150,000 jobs just in Atlantic Canada. So it's extraction. And how are we going to get around that? I don't understand that. You can't be an honest broker in the energy security relationship between US and Canada if you cannot create policies that are realistic and pragmatic, as you said.
Well, the only worry I get, and I'm seeing some folks popping out and saying that stuff too, is that Trudeau and his government are going to try and use the Trump administration as a foil. They're going to try and actually personify them as bad as evil, what already failed south of the border electorally, hopefully to win his support here in Canada, as a protector of Canada against the big bad Trump regime, which really concerns me. As you said, trade is so critical and important, and antagonizing Trump right now is one of the dumbest things you could do. But unfortunately, Prime Minister Trudeau is not really known for doing smart things.
Well, we're also a security threat. I mean, let's just be honest. I can't believe I'm saying this about my country. And my parents arrived here and we're so grateful to be here. They felt it was a privilege, not a right, to be Canadian. And that was how I was raised. I question being Canadian almost every day right now because there's such a malaise and such a lack of hope in this country. But then you also see the very concerning stories. I mean, the Chinese doctor using our labs here, and how the RCMP had warned about her being a security threat, people lying, the green slush fund, and then all the other security issues we have. I'm not so sure, so we have to really think about what is our plan. What are we going to bring to Trump and his administration in a surety? Because when he actually does do what he says he's going to do, which is deport hundreds of thousands of people out of the United States. And remember, he's got the power now to fill all those positions, to be able to deploy not only personnel, but policy to get that done now with very little check and balance on that. Are these people coming to Canada? We also, there's huge disagreements between the U.S. and actually the Five Eyes about how Canada's approached even the Palestinian refugee question as well, and what our commitment, I think it was 10,000 we were bringing in. So under the surface, U.S. is not, U.S. was ticked off with Canada way before Trump showed up. And Trump is just going to be very verbal and use a lot of vernacular around, where our sore spots are. And we better be prepared to hear the hard truth. It's going to be a lot of home truths that come to us, Cory.
Yeah, and I put that out on X earlier. That I was only I was only half joking with it when saying, well, if he's going to be deporting hundreds of thousands, I hope he's sending them south rather than north. And then I said, I'm sorry, Mexico, my apologies, but it's just self-interest. I mean, Canada, we've already got, a prime minister who finally admitted we're taking in too many immigrants as it is, and taking in hundreds of thousands who are declared illegals in the United States is not going to do our economy or our public safety any favors. He should be talking on the phone and, hopefully saying, well, let's talk about this, where we're going to send the people you're moving out of your country.
Well, and I mean, last night's election results, which, I think if the left really, or the progressives as they call themselves, which I don't think they are, they're not progressive, it was a lot of Hispanic men and women that overwhelmingly voted for Trump last night. And here's the deal. And new Canadians and Canadians like myself, where I'm technically first generation, respect the right way of coming into a country, because people like my parents had to work so hard to get here. And I think we saw that. So if anyone thinks he's going to have a lot of pushback, but you're right. The problem is it's places like El Salvador, for example. It's not just Mexico. It's other places that Canadians don't really think about that the Americans are really battling with. And we saw some of that on the Quebec border, and I've forgotten the road now. But yeah, we were seeing them from Nigeria, Syria, El Salvador, places that we as Canadians don't normally think as being a place of huge immigration for us. That's where these refugee claims are coming from. So it's going to be interesting. A cold wind has whipped through Ottawa today. And hopefully it's enough of a shock to their system that they realize they can't be lazy, they can't lie, they can't abuse any more taxpayers' dollars. It is time to smarten up and get with the program. But quite frankly, Trump knows that Trudeau's a lame duck, and he knows that the Liberal government is in complete disarray right now. And any sort of platitudes that are coming from Melanie Joly or Trudeau today are complete falsehoods. I think they're much more concerned. I think many things are intersecting for them right now, Cory. And I think this is a scary time to be working for the Liberal government. It's also a scary time for us Canadians that don't want them there anymore.
Yeah, and again, the immigration question and things is going to be a big one. And it was a good point with the Hispanic population, is that it's much more diverse than just saying Mexicans or Puerto Ricans or anything of the sort necessarily, or Cubans. And there's a lot of well-established people of Hispanic descent that are second generation, third generation, or even first generation, but they came up and they're working and they're established, and they're feeling the pressures too. They want to pay their bills as well. They want to buy homes, raise families like everybody else. They don't want to be in crime-ridden neighborhoods. That's what they fled. And they're still playing the identity politics. I'm seeing some embittered left Democrats down there actually calling Hispanic people white nationalists. It's bizarre what they're doing, because the Hispanic vote, the identified, the citizens or the people who could vote in the States, rejected the Democrats this time around. I mean, they'll have more time to have some introspection and think about things, but alienating the established working people from the Hispanic nations is not going to be a smart course on their part.
Well, I would suggest that the Hispanic population or immigrants that come into the United States, I would say, would be similar to where we've seen our Ukrainian new Canadians from Ukraine. Very hardworking. I'm always impressed to see what they're able to achieve. I'm not just saying that. I think the Democrats have somehow weirdly flipped the script almost to a racist, anti-Hispanic conversation, like they, in the way of maternalizing them or paternalizing them, that they need some sort of special treatment and a safety jacket to get through this. They are some of the hardest working people in the world, much like those who have arrived here in Canada from the Ukraine. I don't know one person that I've interacted with, either Hispanic or from Ukraine, that haven't started a new business or haven't hustled and immediately been employed. I am very happy to have any of those workers here. We need them. The Americans recognize that as well. The problems that they have, Mexico is a separate situation because of the just the stronghold the cartels have there. El Salvador has some of that as well. But, I would also be very concerned about some of the African nationals coming in as well. You've got ISIS rolling through there. We don't talk about that very often. Actually, the more I think about this, Trump's plate is going to be very full, because the U.S. needs to step forward versus stepping back the way that the UK and the U.S. have done under their previous administrations. And I'm worried about Starmer as well. So there's a lot going on. But I would say this. It is absolutely stunning to me that the Democrats have not only lost Hispanic women and men, the entire Jewish community. I mean, that is unbelievable. The Democratic Party was the home to the Jews. It really, really was, especially places like New York. It just hasn't been that way. They have alienated white women. They've alienated Black men. I saw tweets today coming from Republican Black males that said, don't ever tell a Black man how to vote. It would be similar to how I feel as a woman. Don't tell me how to vote. The abortion issue just never landed. There were so many other issues. And I mean, I can get into some of the crises that they do have around their employment sector. They have 3 million, what we would call white collar jobs. So whether that's STEM or that's legal services, et cetera, that they cannot fill. And they haven't been able to fill for 3.5 years. That's why you're seeing 150,000 Canadians spread into places like Houston, or where I went to North Carolina. I saw more Canadians in Houston than I see on a regular basis here in Canada. So, it's going to be interesting. They've got, their economy is all fired up, but there's things that need to be put into place for it to be completely solid and a strong foundation. The flip side to that is that they have their closest neighbor and ally, Canada, who has a broken supply chain, a really low production rate around manufacturing. We're losing manufacturers, especially in the SME market. We don't really have mining in British Columbia anymore. We have now caps on energy. We need to figure out what makes us valuable to the Americans. And number one, it's being a good security partner that you can trust us, which you can't do right now. Number two, we need energy security in North America. The world is a mess, and we need to be prepared for the worst case scenarios. So these are the two things I think Canada should really be focused in on.
Well, we'll know a lot more in the next couple of months, I guess, as the Trump starts appointing and moving, speaking of the directions he's going to be going to. We'll be watching it very closely. I hope I'll get you back and we can start to dissect, Canada's reaction and Trump's settling in there. So before I let you go, where can people find your commentary and what you're up to these days, Alise?
So first of all, I want to say is I am a subscriber to Western Standard. $10 a month is nothing. And I check my email every morning. So I want to encourage all the viewers and listeners to please subscribe. It's so important that you do so. You can find me on Twitter at Diary of a Fixer. And you can find me on LinkedIn. But I'm mainly on Twitter. pretty much all the time right now, Cory.
Great. Well, I gotta love it when the guest gives our publication a plug while she's at it. So thanks for coming on to talk to us today. I mean, there's only so much we can cover in this time. We'll have to have you back. And I look forward to talking to you again soon.
So nice to see you again, Cory. You take good care of yourself, okay?
Great. Thanks. You too. All right, so there's Alise Mills, and as you can see, yes, lots to share. I mean, 15 minutes just isn't enough to pack it in. There's so many issues, so much nuance, so much going on. So yeah, look her up, Diary of a Fixer on X. And, I'm going to use that as a segue to talk about one of the aspects of this election was this, as people have been pointing out, one of the big losers was legacy media. They really are, because south of the border, every major media outlet was just grossly pro-Democrat. I mean, leanings in media were nothing new. That's happened since the very first newsletter was graven onto a rock and spread. I'm sure another neighbor put a different opinion and carved it onto a rock and threw it at his other neighbor's head. That's just the way it goes. But the slant, the bias, the tilt has just gone so far, gotten so bad, so blatant that it backfired. It really did. People tuned them out. And what's happened? What are some of the things that impacted this election? Elon Musk's influence on it was incredible. I'm not talking about the $1 million grants going to people and things like that. But yes, turning X into, Twitter, turning it into a new hub of open information, turning it into a spot where anybody can get on and broadcast and move things out. And that gave a platform to people like Joe Rogan. If you like or don't like Rogan, it doesn't really matter. You can't deny the influence people like him have now. 40 million people tuned in to that 3-hour interview with Donald Trump that he had. 40 million people. We're talking an election that was decided in a lot of states, by tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people. When I drove back from Fort McMurray, Jane and I tuned in. We listened to the Joe Rogan podcast so we can listen to 3 hours of Trump. It still didn't really endear me to the man too much, but I felt at the end of that 3 hours, I knew a heck of a lot more about him than I did before I started listening. And have we had those kinds of opportunities to hear from political leaders like that before? No, we didn't. And this is where it's turning into a go-to. People are going to the alternative media because they don't trust the legacy media. Look at the polls. People are rejecting legacy media. They're sick of them. The CBC is just repugnant in Canada, and down in the States, MSNBC and the rest of them, sobbing, crying at the end of the elections. Well, try to show a little balance, guys, a little, because nobody trusts you anymore. So we get that, and it starts turning things. I mean, we were joking about, Peanut the squirrel and the raccoon, but look at the things that influence opinion. Talk about a symbol, that came out to show the dangers of authoritarianism, the dangers of control. This was a guy who people haven't been watching that, but who had a squirrel. It had a huge Twitter or I think a TikTok following, but he'd adopted it since it was a little baby squirrel and turned it into a house pet. And he had it dressed up in little outfits, and it would jump on a command to hang on his bathrobe while he walked around the house, and he'd feed it and things like that. It was very cute, very fun. But apparently it ran afoul of the rules in New York. And the authorities came. They busted into the house, a group of them, 10, 11 people, to seize this illegal squirrel. And they didn't just seize it, they killed it. They got it into custody, and then they killed it. They killed it because they said they needed to do a rabies test. So an innocuous, harmless, little cute house pet squirrel that was harming nobody. And the state seized and killed it. And it went viral. It went all over the internet, through X, through TikTok, through YouTube, you name it. People were horrified. People were disgusted. And it became, an analogy. It became, a story of how bad authoritarianism has gotten, how bad the big state has gotten, how bad control has gotten, how little respect they have for you, your life, your private abilities. They won't think twice of kicking your door in and killing your pet. And yes, I think that had a bit of an impact on the election. That shows the power of alternative media. The difference is you wouldn't have seen this 20 years ago. You might have seen some idiotic, overpowered bureaucratic jerks getting in and killing somebody's house pet. You can't put the between authoritarians, you can't deny what they want to do with things. But it wouldn't have spread virally like that. and imprinted on people's minds. And which of the two parties, when you're looking at the American election, was looking more authoritarian? Which of the parties was valuing individual freedom more than the other? Well, certainly not the woke ones, if we're just speaking of backfiring, right? No, the Democrats were the authoritarians. They were the establishment. So young people, disgusted people, things like that were turned off of it. Mr. Stanley saying, was peanut a false flag? Oh, come on. Not everything's a conspiracy. Sometimes, in fact, most things, when it comes to bureaucratic overreach, isn't a conspiracy. It's incompetence. It's stupidity. And that's what happened to poor Peanut. But I bet you that we'll never be able to measure it. But I bet with a lot of people who are sitting on the fence, that's where you start to see a 0.5% roll just due to Peanut. Not vengefully, but just people saying, wow, it's getting pretty scary, because Peanut came along after the whole COVID thing, but people were still on edge. We were forced into masks. We were forced out of work. We were forced not to be allowed to travel. We were banned from going to weddings and funerals for loved ones. And a lot of people were coerced into getting a vaccination they didn't want to get. And when you see Peanut, when you see the state still feeling so entitled that they can burst into your home and kill your pet, they realize, wow, I'm just one outbreak away from being locked down again. Nobody has learned anything. Things haven't gotten better. I'm going to vote against the lockdown party. And that was the Democrats. So that was another factor in it. It certainly was. And again, a victory for alternative media that's growing. Certainly there's a lot of misinformation in independent media. Absolutely. And it's up to us. It takes personal responsibility to sift through it and find out what's real, what's not. It's hard. It's hard. I mean, there's a lot of deep fake, crazy stuff going on out there. But I would rather be barraged with too much information than having the state controlling my information. That's what we got going on in Canada, right? That's what we got with Bill C-63 or 68. I can't keep up with them anymore. C-18. C-11, those are all modeled to hurt independent media, to have government control media. I can't wait for that wretched old institution, the CBC, to be defunded, presuming Pierre Poilievre follows through and does with his promise and gets rid of it. So the other part was the backfire of the woke, though. The lecturing, the elitists. The elitists really got knocked down. Alise talked about that. Dave talked about that. And that's some of the truth. Look at the states that flipped. They're working people. And they're tired of being talked down to. They're tired of being called every name in the book for questioning some of the ridiculousness coming out of our highly educated people. There was a man with a full-out bulge in his bathing suit, fully intact, twigging berries, winning swim meets, bullying women, reports, from the other swimmers of, yes, him changing. They'd have to change in the change room, and there's the old nuts and berries dangling in their ears. And we're told we're intolerant for questioning that. We're being unreasonable for saying that, hey, maybe that guy should compete with guys. The elites didn't realize, but the people at large said, this is nuts. This is stupid. Yes, the nuts thing. That covers both the squirrel and this guy swimming with the girls. And either way, and then, just in time, we find out that the boxer who was beating the hell out of women at the last Olympics, turns out it was a man as well. Apparently he had a microchode, but it's still a male piece of anatomy, and his testes were internal. It doesn't matter. It was a man, and he beat up women. And you were called a bigot if you questioned that. You were called intolerant if you questioned that. Well, you know what? The majority are smarter than the elites. So take your stupid post-secondary crap and that list of letters next to your name. You're trying to tell people that a man is a woman when they aren't. And it doesn't mean people are intolerant of trans rights. You see, that's the problem. That's where they found the line and they just went way past it. Most people don't care if it's an adult, identifies as a woman, dresses and wants to live that way. Most people absolutely respect that. Live your life, do what you can, be happy, have relationships, that's no problem. But don't ask us to suspend reality and say that a man is a woman, particularly in sports when we're talking about these things, or now that we're getting into it's always pushing on the children. I'm not saying most trans people are pushing that. They aren't. It's the activists, it's the elites, it's the nutcases there. And the voters in the states, particularly the blue-collar voters, they said that's enough. You got to remember the old base of support for the Democrats up there used to be the unions. Okay, that's fine. But those were lunchbox carrying working people. Not these flaky, nutcases with their woke ideology. They'd had enough and they pushed back. They just want to be safe and they want to have jobs. They want economic security and to feel safe sending their children to school. It's really as simple as that. And to have these tall foreheads constantly telling them they're fools, that they're rednecks, that they're bigots, well, look how that all turned out. It cost you clowns an election. And they got 4 years to think about it. We'll see if they've learned. I mean, I'm seeing from the embittered supporters right now of the Democrats online, it looks like none of the vocal ones learned anything right now. Though, again, it's good to see Kamala, conceding and talking about a smooth transition. That's good on her part. Appreciate it. Again, I think it was one of the worst things that Trump did was making a mess and denying the last election. I'm sorry, I know some people disagree. I don't care. That election wasn't stolen. Trump lost it. But now he won this one. And he's there. He's there for 4 years. And a lot of it, he should have been easy to beat, guys, if you weren't being so woke, so elitist, and so stupid. So I'm hoping, all I can hope for now is a whole lot of positive change coming from Trump. I hope our dingbat in Ottawa deals with the new administration somewhat wisely, or some people at least grab him by the ear and make him deal with it a little wisely, because it's so important. They're our top trading partner. They're our top ally. Things that happen down there impact us whether we like it or not. Let's have a good relationship with them. Either way, an exciting and interesting night, an exciting and interesting day. It's an exciting and interesting year. Thank you all for tuning in, guys. Thanks to the subscribers. Again, independent media is the future. Catch me on X at Cory B. Morgan. That's where the media is going these days, guys. Watch the Pipeline tonight and watch Hannaford. Our broadcasts are expanding. And, of course, go to westernstandard.news to get all those updates. Dave's bringing them up all the time. So we've covered a lot. There'll be more to cover next week at this time. Thank you again. We'll see you at that time.